Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Thursday. It's July 2nd. This will be our chart lesson for today, and this is going to wrap up our week. No chart lesson tomorrow. No, the markets tomorrow's a trading holiday. I think it opens till noon or something, but I don't recommend trying to trade that. You just, if you want to sim trade, if you think you can find a trade just to spend some time at the screen, that's probably okay. But I wouldn't try to trade it live. You don't want to get stuck in a trade because a lot of times you'll see days where it just does like this right here, where it's just a little tight. It might move a little bit, but you basically just get chopped up and waste a bunch of time. So I would recommend taking the day off and enjoying a holiday and being done with it. So uh, anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about today and wrap up this week. Um, I would ask you before we get started, I would ask you if you would just, I know it's probably a good time for some of you to do some chart trading over the weekends and stuff like that and some study time, but if you would just hold your trading questions till I get back, just so I don't come back to 300 plus emails sitting in my inbox plus what'll come in on starting on Monday. So it would be nice if I could come in with a clean slate. So if you got emergency or something, by all means, email me, and if I can, I'm going to be at my lake house this weekend, so I have very limited uh, cell service and no internet there other than my cell service. So I probably won't answer anything other than what emergency that I can get to over my phone. So, uh, but yeah, if you have an emergency or something, feel free to email me. But otherwise, I'd appreciate it. Just as a favor to me, if you'd hold them, that'd be great. So, all right, let's go to the chart lesson. We start off with this huge rally during the overnight. Nice big rally here from down around 3,100 all the way up 55 plus points, probably closer to 60 point move there. Notice you got your two-tiered channel working up. You get a close outside and a couple of swings to a new high, and then it sells off. That's perfect price action. You had a little bit of a sideways channel here, but this was your main play, and you had the break. Even this one, you had a little close outside and move to a new high, and then it sells off. And this was a pretty strong sell-off, and it was two basically perfect measured legs. See if I can somehow grab the right one here. You can see there's leg one. So once it started lower, just look for, I mean, that's to the tick, basically. You can't get much better than that. Then we sold off down. We had a little two-legged correction here. Again, a perfect measured move. And then we just kind of worked sideways. There's still a little upward trend here. And there's two tiers to this. It's just impossible to grab the one you want to grab. May not be able to grab that one. Well, it's just going to be impossible. Let's see if we can do it this way. Still can't grab it. There we go. But just measure this range and look for a possible measured move. And notice we went up. We went a little further than that and turned down. You could play this either way. You probably wanted to play it both ways just to be safe. When I say either way, the range or the channel. We did get a break, a close outside down here, move to a new high, and then it sold off. And a bunch of you got trapped right here. I got several emails, but most of you either had this trend line drawn wrong, or you had it, or you didn't have it at all. And you didn't have most of you had the range, and at the very least, it's a failed break out of a range on a lower high. You wouldn't want to go long right into that measured move range high right there, and you can see that clearly. I just measure this and go to there. But there were two ways to get this target, because if you measured this leg as well and then went to here, you got another measured leg. And you had one right here. You measure that leg and there, and we got a perfect measured move on that one as well before we went sideways again. We really started going sideways before that, but it reached that measured move, and then of course there was this first leg here. and then your second leg here, and another nice measured leg. So the measured legs, all your measurements worked really well today, giving you targets. So again, there's the big picture, the leg up, and of course prices were probably trying to fill this gap. That's not unusual. Very rarely do gaps not get filled quickly. We didn't end up filling it today. The market closed here. Of course, we'll trade during the overnight. Maybe it fills it before the overnights, but it didn't fill it on today, which is what you'd usually expect. But that's a long move during regular hours to try to make. So not surprising that we didn't make it, but we didn't fill it, I mean. So, but let's back out. We'll talk about the trades and we'll wrap up our week. People always tell me they want to see the big picture, and I try to back out, and then people can't see the bar. So I'm going to try to back out. I've shown you the big picture, but I'm trying to appease everybody here. So, but anyway, we were trending up, and here you start going sideways, and you drop out of there, and you bounce right off of the trend line and come back up and close. Just go long. That's your key entry point. It's a nice bullish bar. You still got plenty of room back to the highs there. There's enough room. The fact that we traded up into that, you're probably going to get another leg up regardless. And 7 o'clock came right in that little trading range as well there. So this was early. This was an early chance. And that would have been your target. And you say we well outdid that. So this was a strong trend. And you can see, look at that thing go right there. Boom. I mean, you had a bunch of people in there probably trying to pick tops and stuff, and then as it takes off, it hits those stops, and then also the people that chase the market start jumping in. Where does it go? It goes right back up to the other side, just like you would expect, and then it starts working back. And notice you get a first entry, and then you get a second entry. The only reason I marked this one green is because it's not a really great bar. It's not perfect. There was a little bit of a trading range here too. It's two-tiered actually by the time this sets up. And you get a little failed break lower too. So if this wasn't for this being a failed break out of this little congestion area, I'd probably not even mark this one because it's kind of in that no man's land in the middle where it could bounce off that midline and go back down to the trend line, because that's what we're expecting. Prices came off the high, so unless this is going to continue to be super strong and it starts bouncing off the midline, but you want to see it bounce and take off multiple times, at least 2 or 3 times off that midline before you're going to really start to trust that, because the ideal play is for it to come off the high and go back to the trend line. We came off the trend channel line. That's what this is. The other side of the trend channel is just the trend channel line. This is the trend line. So we break, we go higher, we pull back, and you don't want to go long right into there. It's a first entry. It's right into the highs. It would have worked, but you see it fails pretty quickly. And you might even consider going shorter on that second entry on a failed breakout. But this has been a really strong trend. We are a little bit away from the EMA. So if you took that knowing it was aggressive and just saying, hey, I want to risk it, I'm okay with it, but you'd be better off to skip it. And of course, we bounce here. Notice we tested it once. We tested it twice, 3 times, and then we came back and tested it again. So it's a double test even if you count the spread on it. We tested it once. The next time down we tested it, and this was the third time down. So I like going along there, and guess what? That's exactly a 6-tick move, so it got exactly what you needed to put your buy stop 1 tick above it and then get out with a 5-tick scalp. If you tried to get 1 tick more, you'd have got stopped out on it to watch it take off again. But we're not back to the trend line, so you'd want to be, it's a very low risk trade there because there's not many ticks in that bar. What is there? 4 ticks in that bar. I mean, we don't get many setups like that. It is a second entry too, although we're not really looking for second entries. Notice that first entry and then second entry. So there's a lot of reasons like that trade, and And that's why we scalp for 4 ticks in the S, because it's amazing how many times you'll get exactly that, and then it does something different. Didn't mean to do that. Sorry about that. But we came over and we bounced. I marked this one just because it was off the key entry point. It's technically, this is your signal bar. But again, it's a failed break lower, and it's right off the key entry point. I probably should have marked this green because, you know, I tear you guys up about not using the right signal bar. But on this strong trend, with prices only going sideways to come back to this, this is a great entry right here. Because prices couldn't even correct, really. They just went sideways to get over here. And it's really kind of like an up-down bar. But if you went long there, I got no problem with it. And again, you could really argue for it to be green because technically this is your signal bar, but they're really kind of like an up-down bar. There's not much difference there. This one actually closed at the same place this one opened. So I marked it because of where it is and because of how strong this was, and because that probably trapped some shorts as well. People at the opening looking for, thinking they faked everybody out going short, and guess what? The price action is right, and it still follows the price action. People ask me all the time. I read about avoid the open; it's dangerous, and I've read that 100 times. In fact, I probably have an old article on here that says to be careful during the open, but as I've learned to trust the price action, I don't even worry about it anymore. The price action is always right, even if they open, and it shows you right here. It bounces right off the trend line. Look at that trend line. Prices just continue to bounce off of it all day long, and it was no different right there. And look at it take off. And if you're sitting here saying I can't trade because it's at the 8:30 open, which is where it goes from gray to white, you're missing out on some of the best trades there are. Pulls back here, gives you a first entry. That's a really strong sell-off, so I would wait on a second entry here. You can see that we did get a close and a new low all in outside, and we got a close outside the trend line and a new low all in one bar. But I'd still wait for a higher low, which comes here, and you just don't get a setup. There's a failure here, but being right into those highs, you don't want to go long right there when it just got rejected off of it. And you see what happens. If you go long there, you get rejected off of it. So I don't have my line on there, but let's just put it on there. So you don't want to go long right into those highs. And we finally push through, and you still really just don't get a setup here. You can tell this brown channel is pretty much in play. It's tempting to go long right here because you got a little bit of room, but look how congestive that is. It would have worked, but I just don't recommend it. Look what happens when it breaks out above up here. It turns right back down again. And you just don't ever get another long. And you don't really want to go short till you get a trap. And a bunch of you asked me about a trap right here. Notice I don't have a trap. It didn't break higher. It actually broke lower and turned up, but it never went through. So I never got the long trap that many of y'all got, because it's a shame, because that's a great place to go short. But if you just wait a few minutes later, there's a shorter term trend. There's two trend line channels here, in my opinion. And this is the shorter term one, and this confirms that trend line. And notice it's right at the EMA too. That even makes it more strong, and that's the first break. So, but the main reason I'm not worried about the signal bar, because notice that new high, first entry. Well, that's where my second entry failure is. So if you were like me and your second entry failure's here, right on that key entry point, or even if you had a good signal bar, I'd probably still take that trade. That's a good push and move through the EMA and pull back and test it. Just what you'd expect to kind of see move lower. Okay, I had a little interruption there, but we were talking about this failed second entry long, and look at this thing go. And you would look at a minimum, you'd measure this first leg down and look for a measured leg, and you see we started to bounce, and that's right at that trend line too, but we pushed way on down and overshot past that. So that turned out to be a great entry up there. But for those of you that got trapped, you would have had to go long right here. And you've already had your break here, even if you're looking at the brown one, brown channel there. So, but the main thing is you got plenty of closes outside of the main two-tiered channel. And I didn't show you this. Let me show you. There's pretty much leg 1, and then there's leg 2 right there. Actually, is that the lowest point? Yeah, that would be the lowest point. So that would have given you a clue that we may be going to turn down, because you can't get to it above. You've already had your break and 2 legs up either way you look at it. Leg 1 and leg 2. I think those are both the same. So, and we didn't quite get there either. So, but then you got, even if you played the brown one, you got to close outside here, new high. And there's no setup on mine for the second entry till way down here, and you know better to take one down here. So, and then of course you got that next leg down. You don't want to be selling way down here. You might take that short right there. It is off that main trend line. We are going sideways. You don't have any real consistent lows here, but it is rather consistent right there. So that's a possibility. It is at the EMA too. It's not a second entry or anything. So that's one you might take. I'll at least make it green. But when you sold off that hard and had an overshoot like this, you're probably going to get a break soon. So you're probably you're probably headed back to the trend line. So the key here would be, if you're playing this range, you just got to have enough room to get out. I think there's enough room. I didn't even count it, look at it really that close. So see what this bar is right here. There's more than enough room. There's 10 ticks in that bar right there. So there couldn't be more than 2 overlapping, 1 or 2 overlapping. So there's more than enough room there. Sometimes it's hard to tell just looking at the bar. You really have to see how much room is in there. We come back, and you do get a second entry here, but you're not back. You really don't have this trend line confirmed up here, and you're not back to it, quite back to it yet. Again, you might look at it like a failed breakout, but being that close to the trend line, I'd wait, because if you did take that, it's probably a loser. I don't think there's enough ticks in there to get out of that one. And then and plus you got this trend line working up. You can see it right there. And then finally, this is a better play, is wait on the lower high here. And that's not a perfect signal bar. And then this is just another, but it's inside, but it's still real bearish. So, and they got, this is really your signal bar. So if it breaks lower there, right at that, where you're looking for it, a key entry point, then, and plus, this is the first break of this trend line, and that's been a pretty long trend down. So you're probably going to get a move on down to a new low. So you just need to set up. And that one's not perfect, but that's bearish enough. If you had a better signal bar, then that's even better. And if you weren't as good as that one, you might skip that lower high. And of course, you're looking for the measured leg, which we got that's it right there. That's how big this first leg down was, up from off the highs, and then you can see we got a perfect measured leg down to the tick. But we dropped on down. We're just going sideways. At this point, you're working on another leg down. I just don't think I would buy unless I was back to the key entry point. And then notice what happens. You run back up to the key entry point. You get that little break higher right there, and it turns down and goes right out the other side. I like going short 1 tick below that, but you could even go short right there. Runs on down, and then you get a second entry and a lower high right here, matching highs, big bearish bar. I did mark that one green because there's plenty of room to get out before this low, but you got another low right here, and you see how it bounced a couple of times. this thing was bearish enough, it continued on down, and you are getting really close to your measured leg there. So, and notice what's happening here, how we overshot here, but now we can't even get back to that line. And we're getting a little further away and a little further away. That's telling you something, that it's about to head the other direction, or at least you're going to get a correction of some kind, probably 2 legs or something. And it's really risky to buy there. I think you need a higher low, which doesn't come to here. And it's, you don't know. You want to wait on a second entry here, and you really don't get one. Technically, this makes a higher low and higher and high. So if it went lower and turned up, you could have looked at it like a second entry in engulfing bar, but it doesn't do that. So that's not a second entry. You just get a first entry there, and then you get a little congestion. So you're still not back to the trend line really. And then finally you get back to it, and you just don't get a setup here. This looks a lot like the original high where prices first reversed. But you don't get a trap or anything either. And then, of course, draw this trend line. And then we didn't quite touch it there. I don't think I've actually got it exactly right. Even if I move it up, even still, it doesn't quite touch. But I just looked at that as a second entry and a higher low. Notice that high, first entry, and then there's a second entry, and that's a higher low than this one. So, and you got plenty of room to get out. It takes a little bit of pushing to get up there. And then by that time, you can just see we're kind of back in this little range again. That's another thing I forgot to talk about. I really played this as a failed breakout with a higher low and being a second entry, more so than this trend, because you don't really have a whole lot to confirm that trend. The trend line's not confirmed. This looks valid when you drag it up here, but you really needed to confirm it, and it kind of confirms it right here. But you're still playing this range, and here's you a little small signal bar, plenty of room to get out, and then here's you a higher low, same thing. And then it just kind of stuck in the middle here. You don't really get any setups off the highs or the lows until right here. Notice what happens here. You bounce off that trend line and finally confirm it, and you make a first entry short, and you push through here, pull back, make a second entry short, and you come back up and close outside. I like going long right there on that failed second entry. And your first measurement will be to measure that. I'd measure that range. And of course we go a little bit higher, but that gave you a nice target. So if you got out just in front of that, you got out fine. Then it pulls back, first entry, second entry. You do get a little overshoot. Notice you close outside right there, but you still get a second entry long. And this thing didn't take off. And this is why you put your safety stop. This is a great example of why we put our safety stop where we put it. Notice if you had it anywhere than one tick below that signal bar, you would have got stopped out. And if you tried to re-enter, you'd have got stopped out probably again and again. And then, but if you put it where it goes, that turn still works out to be a great trade, even though it didn't take off like we expected. And once it did take off, look at it go. And so now you've got a close outside a new high. And if you look at that little channel working up, then you get a close outside a new high. And look how far away. That's also a second entry. Notice that new low. First entry, second entry. Plus we had a measured move up. That's the orange line. We measured this move. And then we look for a measured move up, which that's why I put that line there. And you get that second entry short. Nice bearish bar. You actually get a lower high here, but it's not engulfing, so you can't go short below that bar. And by the time it gets here, it's just too big, and you don't want to go short. It could be a failed breakout here. This looks like a little range. And that takes us into 2 o'clock. Of course, it does come back and give you a failed second entry long and turns down. And that is just barely after 2 o'clock. So if you were still trading and saw that, I wouldn't have a problem taking that trade. It actually broke higher and turned and went back out the other side. You could even go short right there and look at it go, because this is played out here now. Both the channel, and of course you're back inside the range. So even if you just, you probably want to make sure you got enough room between here and here just in case it bounces. Which look, it did temporarily, but it just couldn't hold. And that's why you always got to have enough room, because sometimes it'll bounce, and it had to bounce a long way to stop you out on that one. But sometimes it will bounce, even though it's going to go lower and stop you out. And that's why, I don't know why that's sitting down there. Did I move that from somewhere? Must have been one of my leftover ones. But anyway, that's what I saw today. Pretty good trading day. Nothing too out of the ordinary, nothing too surprising. This probably threw off a lot of you. When you get in these real tight channels like that, the only way you can enter that is to buy real small bars off the low and sell real small ones off the high. Notice there's not many trades in there. Once we got into that real tight, notice I didn't really have any trades marked on either side until we broke out up here on a trap. So that's my recommendation. Just like right here, notice that I don't mark any trades in there. You just can't trade that stuff. You got to have a setup. And if you don't see one, don't fight it. Don't argue with it. And that's what most of you do. You're just so busy, you got to find a trade. It's been a while. Most of you probably missed this one where you're supposed to enter, and so you're seeing this thing move down, and then it starts to crack, and you're thinking, I got to get short, I got to get short, I got to get short. And you get in, and it stops you out, and then still goes right where you thought it was going to go. So you have to be patient and just wait on the setup. And if you don't get one, the correct trade is no trade. Or say that a few times to yourself if you need to. If you don't understand what's going on, and you're not getting a setup where you're expecting one or at a key entry point with a good signal bar, following the rules, then don't take the trade. Because if you're just guessing and you gamble, guess what's going to happen? Gamblers do not last in this business. Don't be a gambler. Be patient. If you have to sit for an hour or even 2 hours, there's times when you just have to sit and there's not anything you can do about it. You're just waiting on prices to come back, and then it'll give you an easy setup. Just about everything going on here, if you just waited, if you just bought off the key entry points on the trend lines, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6. And then we had 7. I would call that one 8. So there's 8 trades, and you don't need but two or 3 good ones. So you might have to wait all day, but there was 8 trades there. It just following the basic, very basic key entry point entries. And that's how you become a better trader. When you start taking this stuff in the middle and, not back to the key entry points, you got to be a really good chart reader. And even then, you'll get fooled some. But if you just wait on the key entry points, you're not going to get fooled too often. When you do, it'll just be because it was time for the break or whatever. I mean, every trend comes to an end, so eventually, but generally what's interesting about that is if you got your trend line drawn properly, very rarely will you get a good setup that fails right at the key entry point. Now, a lot of you send me charts where you got it right at the key entry point and it's a perfect second entry and it fails, but your charts aren't right. So you got to get your charts right. And the way you know is if your prices fit in there properly. And notice how when we get to that line, it turns. When you get to this line, it turns. You get to that line, it turns. You get to this line, it turns. That's how I know I got that right. And look at that midline. Touched it, it turned. Touched it, it turned down. Comes back and tests it here. You can tell that trend line. The price action will tell you if it's correct. And so you can verify it. Look at that channel right there. Prices are touching each side of that line until they start to veer off, and that shows you it's losing momentum, and eventually it's going to turn down. Same thing with this one. We touch it, and then we overshoot it. That tells you something there. And then notice we still turn down, but it breaks it. This one is not as good because we don't get the confirmation until here and it breaks. So it's, I still think it's correct because notice how it comes back into play down here. But it's just not it's not as good a trend line. It doesn't show you as much information. And then you got this one. It turns off. Look how it stops at the line, and then all of a sudden it starts veering away. It can't get back, and you get a break, a new high, and then it sails off. Look at this one. Turns down off the line each time until you get a little overshoot. It turns up when it gets to this line. Even here, it shot through and broke because you had an overshoot, but even here it still turns and goes higher. And where does it turn back down? Right at the other line. And so you know that trend line is correct because the price action is verifying it for you. That's how you know. I guarantee you can do the same thing right here. Look at that trend line. Look what happens each time prices touch it. So if you can learn to draw these, you're halfway there. That one looks about like that. Touches it, turns back up. Touches it, turns back up. Comes down here, it overshoots. The market really got weak down here. People just gave up. And notice where it turns though, right off that line. Here this time it shoots right through, but that's got, and a lot of times when you get oversold and get a big overshoot like that, you don't get a retest. It just takes off, and you didn't have enough time really. So, and I bet you if we draw this trend line, you'll see the same thing. See how quickly I can draw these? I can see it before I ever put the line on there. And notice you're bouncing off this line until you finally get a break. Moves up and it can't even get back to the midline. I'm sure there's a midline in there too, and then it kind of sails off. You actually get a break here and 2 legs up. If you measure that, they're probably close to being measured legs. Leg 1, leg 2. Perfect. To the tick measured move right there. Perfect price action. Now, most of you can't see it that easily, I know, but when you've been doing this for a while and it's a skill and you got to work on it every day and practice it. But that's how you know if your trend lines are right. And people send me their trend lines and they're not even close. They got their price action in between here, but nothing's touching anything ever. And they wonder why it doesn't work for them. So anyway, I spent another 5 minutes here that I didn't mean to. But it's Thursday. I hope everybody has a great 4th of July weekend and you enjoy the break tomorrow. I can't think of much else. I want to wrap this up. But I'll be back Monday. We'll start another week, but I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you